Welcome to the 35th episode of The Smartest People in the Room. If you've been following this series, you understand what we are doing, shining a light on incredibly smart, accomplished people and helping them share stories from their careers and lives, as well as anecdotes about their past, present, and future. Today, I am pleased to keep our momentum rolling by featuring two industry leaders, both who operate on a global level at the very top of their respective corners of the entertainment industry. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Some of you may know that I am a music industry headhunter. By definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview itself. I want to thank our sponsors, for without their support, we couldn't do what we do. I want to thank First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, Core Power Yoga, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and also Organics. So let's get the party started. Today's interviewer is Jared Shapiro. Jared is a brand strategist, marketing maven, and publicist with over 15 years experience in the entertainment and media world as principal of marketing and strategy and PR agency, The Tag Experience. As the former editor-in-chief of the Miami-headquartered Ocean Drive magazine, Jared utilized his 13 years of experience in New York City as the editorial director of In Touch Weekly and Life and Style Weekly, selling a combined 60 million copies per year on the newsstands to further broaden Ocean Drive's international appeal and global reach. Jared is also a New York Times best-selling author and Forbes contributor. He's written for US Weekly, Star, TV Guide, Men's Health, and the New York Post. Jared's first book, a corporate tell-all of sorts with St. Martin's Press titled Going Corporate, Moving Up Without Screwing Up, was labeled by USA Today as tears streaming down the face funny. 3 other books would follow: Perez Hilton's The Red Carpet Suicide, Perez Hilton's True Bloggywood Stories, and Kendra Wilkinson's Being Kendra, which is a New York Times bestseller. Jared's been a regular on TV, including The Today Show, Fox News Channel, Entertainment Tonight, Extra, Access Hollywood, The Wendy Williams Show, Chelsea Lately, VH1, MTV, CBS, The Early Show, CNN, HLN, CNBC, MSNBC, Bravo, We and E, and more. Jared's firm, The Tag Experience, specializes in working with clients in tech, finance, hospitality, food and beverage, celebrity, sports, and more through public relations and full media and brand representation. For more, please visit his website, thetagexperience.com. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you.
And joining Jared as today's special guest is Ola Sars. Ola is a Stockholm-based serial entrepreneur active in the music tech space. He's founder and CEO of Soundtrack Your Brand, the world's fastest growing music platform for B2B, which he co-founded together with Spotify back in 2014. Before founding Soundtrack, he was co-founder and COO of Beats Music, acquired by Apple and transformed into Apple Music, as well as the co-founder of Pacemaker, the world's first DJ-driven music platform. Ola's driving force behind his repeated efforts in transforming the music market comes from his conviction that music is undervalued as an art form and that the music industry offers significant opportunity for value improvement and growth. Through his multiple startups in the music space, he's focused on unlocking that intrinsic value both in B2C and now in B2B. Ola's been featured in Rolling Stone, Billboard, Bloomberg, and is a regular in music and technology publications. Please welcome these amazing rock stars as our guests in today's Smartest People in the Room. Take it away, boys.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Thank you so much for having us, and I'm excited to speak with Ola today. I'm going to add a little bit to what you said about Ola as an introduction as well. Ola, you've been innovating in the music industry for over a decade, and whether it's hardware or software, ideas or products, you've been involved with the biggest names in music, both as brands with Spotify and Beats Music, which later became Apple Music, but also with the people. Spotify's Daniel Elk, Beats Dr. Dre, and Jimmy Iovine. You created one of the most game-changing music sources ever, Apple Music, and you brought streaming music to the masses. You're doing it again now, though. That was consumer. Now you're doing it with business to business. Your company, Soundtrack Your Brand, streams music to over 20,000 brands globally. You've got McDonald's, you've got W Hotels, you've got IKEA, you've got Joe and the Juice, but you've also got mom and pop coffee shops, retailers, and stores around the world in over 74 markets. It is the business to business solution to music streaming. But before we talk about music, I want to know some of the background. Not everyone's final job is their first job, their final profession. You were in the financial markets. Why would you leave finance for music? I'm being sarcastic, of course. Tell us what happened.
Well, why would you leave that very interesting, power generating career in financial markets or in management consulting and all the fun stuff you can do over there? No, jokes aside, look, it's like all of us, right? We're here for a reason in this industry. Some are creators, some are, amazing artists. Some of us just try to help make the industry work by creating the pipeline or the distribution. That was my job in this instance. I mean, I spent 10 years in a previous career doing stuff that probably paid way better and provided a way more interesting career path for a young guy, kind of working the global markets. But it was 10 years ago where it just was going too dark on me. I mean, my soul was basically becoming more cynical every year. I was hating what I was doing, but I was getting up in the morning doing it. And a lot of my friends and kind of my social normal life, so to speak, outside profession were doing things that they loved. And a lot of them were working in the music industry. And 10, 12 years ago when this started happening in my life, it also occurred to me that the music industry was changing right in front of me. So not only with kind of my emotional side, my heart was leaning towards I needed to do something with my life. I needed to get out of the darkness and into the light, follow my passion, which was music. But also the intellectual side of me was seeing something very interesting occurring. And that was obviously that the whole industry was at its core changing in terms of production, which I was very interested in, not good at, but very interested in, was going digital completely. I mean, what you were doing in a studio, you could all of a sudden do on your laptop. Distribution was going digital right in front of me with anything from Pirate Bay, which was one way of distributing illegally, but all the way to kind of efforts of legal, feasible digital distribution, all the way to consumption, where the consumption pattern of consumers of music were consuming music in their phones everywhere all the time. So both from my intellectual kind of business mindset, I saw this is a massive opportunity to actually make a move. Follow my passion and move into the music industry, go, leave the dark side, move into the fun side. And there's actually a pretty fun anecdote about it, if I may. We were on the beautiful island of Ibiza in Spain, outside of Spain, and I was hanging out with some friends that are artists in the electronic music scene. And we were up one morning, night/morning, talking to a very close friend. And I just realized that he was there actually having fun, but making money at the same time. So I started drawing up probably a couple of drinks during that night as well. I was draw up this consultancy matrix in front of me, towards the sun coming up. It's like fun, boring, money in, money out. And I realized that I'm spending most of my time in boring, money in, and then I'm spending a lot of time in fun, money out. And Jonas, my good friend here, was actually spending all of his time more or less in fund money in, which was his job. So he was working with music, his passion. And at that point, actually, that specific point in my life, I decided to dare to make a move. And I had an idea. I've been thinking about that idea for a while, and I just jumped ship from my job and started following that passion. That was my first music startup.
Yeah, and to build off of that, and I forgot to mention, you're based in Sweden, and so what
That's
is
why it's
it?
so dark. It's pitch dark outside right now.
What is it, by the way, about Sweden that spawns the world's largest, I say largest music streaming industries, but I think if you were to take a deep dive into Swedish music, it's really everything about Sweden has something to do with music. What is it? What's the answer?
I obviously don't have the answer to that question, but I have a thesis around it. And we do get that question a lot. We're a small country where, 10 million inhabitants. We're up here in the north. Nobody knows where it is. And, it's just somewhere up there in Northern Europe, right? But yes, proportionately, there's a lot of music coming out of Sweden in terms of, producers, a lot of, big box producers, as everyone knows, from this small economy. We're actually one of the countries per capita that has the biggest music export in the world after UK and US. So, and then on the technology side, which we all know that there's Spotify, obviously Daniel and Martin started that company, which has been, an interesting ride in kind of the distribution model we have. The guys at SoundCloud who are good friends as well. Eric is a very close friend, and they're Swedes as well. They actually moved down to Berlin to continue that, but that's a Swedish team started that, and Cobalt and so forth, and obviously the Beats music team started up here as well, and then we transferred to the US. So yes, there are things coming out of the darkness over here for some reason, and I think there's a couple of aspects to it. I think we have a public school system in Sweden, and we have a lot of public music schools, so that are free for education, obviously, and they're quite good, these music schools. They've been around for a while. So in terms of the art of music, we have a lot of people going through an academic schooling around music. And obviously, a lot of people love music, like myself. And in this instance, they can actually go to school and follow their passion instead of me. You have to kind of create a company later on in my life. So that's one angle to it. And then the entrepreneurship angle to it, I think, is also connected a little bit to our social security system. And it's a pretty stable economy and a stable little country, as you know. And hence people tend to dare to take bigger risks. I think the cost of risk is not as high here. I mean, if you fall, you kind of fall into a safety net. And that's how how we grew up in this country. You more or less have to make an effort to really end up on the street. So people would dare to maybe follow more creative kind of career early with the notion that schooling is free, and then maybe if I fall, someone will pick me up. So that could be one underlying reason where people dare to kind of move into creative stuff like music, and then dare to kind of try to build a business around it, because it sure as hell is not easy creating a living in music that we all know.
That's a really interesting answer, and I'm jealous. We don't often see that in America. I think taking a risk is really seen as a real taking a risk, and it's why people sometimes don't follow their dreams and passions. I want to shout out.
It is in Sweden. It's not like if I fail, somebody's going to pick up my bill. I'm going to have to sort it out myself. But as going to high school,
Right.
or through elementary school, then you think about life differently. But then you're provided this, not the gun to your head. You need to go learn accounting so you pay the bills when you're 25. You have some type of freedom, a bit more to think more creatively as a result of the system, I think. But that's just my subjective kind of this around it.
Before I go to the next question, I'll shout out to the chat room a little bit, because people are talking. I saw there's a Martin from So Stereo. So Stereo is a company we've worked with a little bit off and on. They do licensing and music for commercials and other brands. And Kara from the National Museum of African American Music. I actually went to Nashville like 2 years ago and walked by what they were building or doing there. I know that's where Tom's based. I want to ask you about So Soundtrack Your Brand, like we said, it provides background music for stores, retailers, restaurants. So much of the music industry, the way that it is now, we sort of take for granted. But for those of us older people, we remember back in the day before everything was digitized, you were doing a lot of stuff in the music industry before the digitization really became mainstream, before the iPhone, before the App Store. Tell us about Tonium. That was your first company. It was a music curation platform, but I don't know much about it. Tell me about it, Tonium.
It's funny. So back to kind of the concept of a who knew, but I think for me it was like who knew about Tonium. It was a very unknown little effort that we started 11 years ago. But the funny thing is, I'm still doing the same thing that I tried to do back then. And Tonium, for you who haven't heard of it, which is probably everyone here. But we did develop a little beautiful product called Pacemaker, and maybe some of you've heard of that. It was actually a hardware platform and a software platform which had a very big ambition to become a recommendation engine for music, basically. But it didn't end up that way. So I'll take you through it quickly. The idea when I was in Ibiza and going home, and this was the first idea, was that we saw this market of tastemakers, people who like to push music towards other people and promote or contextualize music. Think about the DJs of the world. Obviously, Ibiza is a DJ-heavy place, and it came from that idea. It was kind of looking at, okay, look what's going on over here. There's this DJ market growing up, and they're actually kind of choosing music and playing music to the world. And they're thinking about what's the right music for this specific context. And Ibiza, it's a club, but it could be a cafe, it could be, a live event or whatnot. So, and then connecting that kind of reality to the notion of digitization of music basically means all of the music in the world available at your fingertips anywhere, anytime. That was my bet. That's going to happen. And, I wasn't the only one making that bet, as you all know. And here we are. But if you connect those two, my thesis was that the interesting part of that equation is what some refer to as curation or selection support or music intelligence, if you may. Kind of who can actually help the music lovers of the world get the right music at the right place at the right time every day, every morning when they wake up. Isn't that an amazing idea? Just, a personalized radio DJ in your ears the whole time. And that was the idea from the beginning. And we started figuring out, and I knew some stuff about algorithms and AI very early, but it was so early. It was actually before the App Store. So we started thinking about the idea, Pacemaker, of kind of democratizing DJing or bringing in all the music tastemakers of the world, connecting them to a platform, then for a next step, connecting all the taste takers, if you may, of the world. So you connect the DJs of the world to all the fans of the world, and you create this music exchange function. So that it was a very pretentious, ambitious idea, right? Way too early, but it was based on kind of the macro of all the music available anytime. Isn't that an amazing, opportunity? So we built a DJ platform. We built a more open door DJ platform for broader mass, which was basically bringing, democratizing DJing. We built a hardware platform called the Pacemaker, which was 120 gigabyte full-on DJ system at the size of a peanut butter jelly sandwich, basically. So anyone could take it with them, all the music, and DJ anywhere in the world, anytime. But the beauty of that, it was basically just collecting the mix data from DJs. And we would connect that hardware to Pioneer and the other software platforms for DJing in order to kind of extract the intelligence, the collective intelligence of the global DJ community. I mean, DJs were called selectors back in Jamaica when the DJ concept kind of was born. So very, very ambitious idea, right? So, but how do we do it? So we were forced to build hardware and distribute hardware in 20 markets. And we built the hardware, the embedded software for the hardware. We built the equivalent of iTunes to that. And then we built an online platform where a DJ could actually upload and share a mix as well. So way too ambitious, way too early in the cycle, but still with the same kind of idea that I'm working with now. sorting out all of this beautiful art in a way that is a win-win situation for the creative industry and the fans of the world. So that was the first stab at kind of taking a position in the future music value chain.
You know, you say it was too early or too ambitious. I'm a big believer in the marathon, not the sprint. And if you look at sort of the timing of what was happening while you were doing all that, and I think you've said in the past that you raised 20 million to launch Pacemaker in 20 markets. So your ability to raise money, your ability to have software, your ability to have hardware, it obviously put you on the map, and it got the attention of some pretty heavy hitters, because across the world, on the other side of the globe, Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine were doing some hardware and software of their own with Beats and Beats Music. And again, like we said, at the time, this digitization of everything was a bit of a foreign concept to the mainstream. We were still sort of using CDs at the time, maybe a little bit of downloading music. But you guys all at the same time, separate conversation, had this idea of, we are going to do everything differently. Okay, so I don't think you were that early, because it was the right time at the right place, because you connected with them. Can you talk a little bit about your connection with Jimmy and Dr. Dre, how they came into contact with you? Because I think a lot of people on this conference, and then anyone in general, is always looking for that big break, or how do I get in front of the heavy hitters or the big guys? I'm sure in the same way some of them would like to be in front of you, you were ankling to get in front of those guys. How did that all come together?
Yeah, it's a funny story as well, because obviously we crashed Tonium. I worked, 365 days, 18 hours, was on a flight. This was before family and everything, thank God. But with this really strong intent to kind of create this interesting knowledge base of music, how do we filter all of this music? But we ended up building hardware and spending 80% of our time trying to fund a hardware production supply chain, which is, really, really tough as a startup. So I was on the floor in Korea in our production facility. We were traveling around distributing. But we built a very beautiful concept. I'm very proud of what Pacemaker was at the end of the day, even if it was too ambitious and maybe not too early, but it was very, very complex. When we crashed that company, I was able to acquire one part of that company, which was the online platform, and then time had caught up with us a little bit, right? We were 4 years later into kind of the development. Daniel and the guys were across the street here and having coffees with us and building Spotify, the initial version of Spotify at that time. And we were way ahead of them kind of technology-wise when we were doing Pacemaker. But then I realized, okay, maybe now we failed with producing and distributing and reiterating hardware. But the software angle and kind of the online angle of music interchange or music exchange was so interesting. We saw all of the people coming in, listening to these DJ sets that were uploaded on our online community, and kind of really saw that function of human curation and how kind of when humans create a mix, how interesting that became for people. And what a great listening experience it was. It was kind of playlist 2.0 already. And the hardware was the first connection with our friends in Santa Monica. They had actually seen the Pacemaker device, because we won like 5 prizes at CES that year, like as the first startup in the space and so forth. And we won the German Design Award, the Swedish Design Award, and so forth. It was a beautiful piece of technology. And they were at that instance thinking about, what do we do in the music industry moving forward? I mean, our publishing catalog we're struggling in our current business model, and we all know, we've heard the stories about them discussing sneakers, but they were doing the Beats by Dre headphone business quite nicely, and they were kind of entering the market of mainstream music through hardware at that point. So we actually had a very deep discussion on them acquiring Pacemaker as being a part of their hardware portfolio with the Beats by Dre headphones and kind of the DJ set or the music player to that hardware. So Pacemaker becoming kind of the Beats music player, because it was the creative, more sophisticated music player in the market, and Jimmy wanted to buy it. But at that point we had like 5-10 meetings, and I was over in Santa Monica, and talking with them, getting to know them, really understanding what they were all about. And they were out to build the next big mainstream music brand in the US. That was the goal. And in that ambition, obviously came their relation to what's going on across the street in Stockholm with streaming and so forth. So they were obviously thinking about what's the next move also for Beats. And going back to Sweden, failing to kind of get them in as owners in the company, because Pacemaker was like in the mid section of Wired magazine at that time, and our investors thought it would be the new Apple and so forth, which they should have been thinking at that point. But that didn't work out because Jimmy and the team didn't want to pay that much to come in. They said they would come in with their network and their clout, and I wasn't able to broker that deal, unfortunately. So we failed, and then Tonium failed, and the hardware business failed. But I was able to save the online platform, which was really the interesting stuff, where you would kind of where consumers would meet with the DJs and so forth. And that was that. I renamed that platform to Let's Mix, and started doing a lot of kind of DJ activations there. And it became very big very quickly. It was like a semi-interactive webcast solution where DJs upload and their mixes and stream them. And that was my second shot at kind of getting a deal done with Jimmy and Dre and Luke at that time, who had entered as well. And we were basically building what they were thinking at that time, a human-driven music platform where humans were the curation components and the brands, and humans were better than machines. And that resonated very well with what they were thinking about and their schemes of kind of taking Beats into becoming a bigger music brand with a music service at the epicenter of that strategy. And I started to re-engage, and we started to re-engage around that idea. And then basically we closed the deal where they acquired Let's Mix from me and my team. And I transferred that company, which was based in Stockholm, into Beats Music, AB, which is the LLC or Inc. of Sweden. And
I was just going to say, you're the guy that registered Beats Music.
Yeah, and that's a funny story as well, actually, because Luke Wood, who was the CEO at Beats, great guy. He was kind of the operator, and a guy called TJ Gruel as well. The project was called after Luke's dog initially, Daisy. So the working name was Daisy. And then they started this process where Trent Reznor came in, and a lot of people came in like talking about what to call this kind of competitor to Spotify that they were going to build. And there was all types of crazy names, from moving it from Luke's dog to something commercial. And then at one meeting, I just did the Swedish thing and said, like, guys, why don't we just call it Beats Music? Like, come on. That's awesome. That's what it is. And so 4 days later, I registered Beats Music Sweden, AB, and we transferred all the assets and technology into that company. And obviously we started building a bigger ambition than my little ambition with Let's Mix. But it was the thesis about, like, imagine a place where you have all these music tastemakers and you could just access them online. And that's an amazing opportunity.
I want to keep going on this subject for a second, but going back to my original question, and then one of our guests actually asked, Scott Detterman asks, as an outsider, how can you meaningfully connect to the right people to get off the ground in the music industry? I think that's a great question. Like, how does somebody, like, they've got the coolest idea, maybe they're an artist, they want to get in, I think it's a different trick when you're an artist trying to get in front of a producer. But if you've got ideas or industry tactics, or you've got something, how do you get in front of people these days? I mean, I know Tom, for instance, is very open on LinkedIn. Even here, he's posting things. He's got a great, but let's just say someone isn't open on LinkedIn. What's that sort of process like? How does someone get in touch with you? They want to come into your company. They've got a cool idea that could help you out, something that could change the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, right? I think, look, I mean, people are usually, very helpful and very friendly, even though you wouldn't think so in kind of the tough music industry. But people are also extremely busy and trying to make a living and pay the rent, right? So it's not an easy industry where they're in. So it's all about relevance, and relevance in terms of timing. Like, you're not going to get anything from anyone if it's not 100% relevant for that person. So it's a lot of luck, and you have to kind of connect it to what you're doing. You can't just randomly try to connect to people. And I've always obviously tried to do something. I'm trying to build something and making an effort to build that. And then that creates kind of my starting point of relevance. And then I would look to, okay, what do I need, and how can this actually be what I'm building? How could that be interesting for someone? But honestly, I'm not a great networker myself, and I don't think Swedes are very good at it in general. So we need to learn from you guys a lot more, and I've been trying to learn through the years. But it's about our kind of culture, and our way of approaching it is product is everything, and that's kind of what we inherited from our industrial heritage in Sweden, and we build product, and we try to build it to export, because we don't have a domestic market. I mean, our domestic market is smaller than New York. So that kind of brings us to the fact that we're always going to have a starting point, or I've always had a starting point of what I'm actually building, and that creates an easier starting point to network, because you have something to offer. I don't know if that helps out.
Yeah, it does. And I'll also just say from my personal experience, I mean, between LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, my email, cell phone, everything's out there in the world in this day and age. So you don't want to be too aggressive, but you also can't be silent. I think there's ways to get in touch with people. And Tom even just mentioning about the network. The bigger your network is, even just being on this conference, attending webinars, talking to people, trying to connect to people. I think it's actually easier today than it was maybe 20 years ago when I was trying.
But it's a very interesting observation for me, kind of entering the music industry from my previous and being Swedish and getting to know people that roll, on that level in the US quickly. I think one thing was that I didn't really have the respect for them as another US citizen would have, because I didn't really understand how powerful they were. So for me, that was a benefit, because I didn't really care. Okay, Trent Reznor, yeah, he's a good musician. He can sit in the room in our workshops. That's fine. But he doesn't really know technology. So, kind of that, which is not true. He's an amazing, but that's kind of what have you built before? And that helps, because you become this pragmatic kind of thing that doesn't really make too much noise, and doesn't ask for things that you don't really need. And that becomes a good balance between people like Jimmy and Dre and a guy like me, where I become more of a soldier, so to speak, and just the doer, because these people are serious about leveraging network to run the business. It's an amazing, I mean, look at what they did. It's unbelievable. They created a multi-billion-dollar business on headphones that weren't even that great. So amazing stuff, and so much learnings from that period. But I think we had a lot to teach them as well around kind of technology and streaming and what that could be. And obviously they had a very clear strategy on kind of how to approach the market. And they wanted to come in with kind of, Jimmy told me, let's build the New York Times for music. That was the pitch. We're not building a robot, we're building a human media platform, or, content-driven platform. That was a very interesting period of streaming, because my friends over the street here in Sweden were just completely nailed down trying to figure out the robotics of music and the AI solution of it, and kind of, so they were, but the truth lies somewhere in the middle, right? Like always. And that's kind of where the market ended up.
So now we're in 2020, and I don't have to point out the obvious, but if we're not in lockdown, if you were to walk into a store, into a restaurant, into a hotel, everywhere you go, you hear music. Odds are, in a lot of those places, that music is being provided by your company, Soundtrack Your Brand, the world's first, biggest, and fastest growing business-to-business music streaming model. But I want you to really tell everybody what is going on, because your journey, you had to get contracts signed, you had to sign up brands, you've got to lock in every track. What does it all mean? Why is it important? And what is it?
Right. So I spent some time in the consumer space, right? And actually, pacemaker was prosumer. I learned a new word back then in English, but they were kind of getting into the prosumer market. And then I went pure consumer with Let's Mix and then Beats. And I learned about all the complexities of music licensing. I mean, the whole model was being architected right in front of us at that point. And there was a war going on like what would the future business model look like in distribution. And learning that from our own team, what we innovated, and from what Spotify had done and other streaming services along with us, all of a sudden, Jimmy started sending me to meetings with brands, asking how can we relate to music streaming? How can we get beats inside our cars? How can we get beats inside our retail or hotels or whatever? And then I just like, we don't have time for that. I'm trying to build a competitor to Spotify, so I just left it all. But that kind of stuck in my head, the fact that obviously coming from where I came from the more kind of public context and DJing, and a wonderful live gig can make you fall in love, and a restaurant with great music is just an amazing experience. And I started connecting the dots unwillingly. I think, like, okay, there's something here outside of what I'm doing right now in the consumer space. That is, imagine if you could actually bring streaming to the public context, and with the same idea as back 10 years ago, the right music at the right place at the right time creates magic. And it also unlocks value, because brands would be willing to pay much more, and that would enable us to grow the music market and flow through royalties to artists at the end of the day, and better royalties. And it would be incremental growth to this macro that was happening already with consumer space. So it wasn't a brilliant intellectual aha moment at all. It was very basic. Look, there's a B2B extension of streaming and no one's doing it. And by the way, I started learning about that market, and it was completely broken, because most of the time when you were walking in hearing music somewhere, the royalties from that playback was somewhere in the Smoky Mountain range. Nobody really knew where it was going. And so we could fix that, right? And we could fix it by a better experience with all the music in the world, contextual adaptation of that experience in real time. If it's raining, it could sound one way. If you're targeting a certain type of behavior, you're using certain types of audio. This amazing new kind of world opened up for me, and I had to, for personal reasons, move back to Sweden, family reasons, and I was totally worn out as well back then, and was on a plane 250 days. And so it was just like, I'm out. And there it was, my next opportunity. It's like, let's take streaming to the business to business market. And what a great thing, because I can actually charge more, which is something I think is very important, I think. And that will improve royalties to the creative industries. And that could be all incremental. That could be something on top of this new music. So it felt good as well. I could stand straight and kind of move into that direction. And here I am.
I'm going to get to a couple guest questions in a second, but it's really cool, Tom. I wanted to say congrats, because we have guests from Germany, guests from Spain, Nashville. I just saw Missouri pop up, Miami, New York, Virginia. But I want, before I get to one or two of the questions, to segue off of what you were saying, a lot of people saw this in the headlines. Peloton was sued for $150 million earlier in the year, because you've got 20,000 people across America on their bikes at home listening to Beyonce. Beyonce's not getting paid, the record label's not getting paid, and Peloton's making all this money. You were talking that ultimately is what Soundtrack Your Brand is trying to do for the rest of the world, is making sure that everyone is hearing the music that they want. And somebody did ask, what songs can you get on Soundtrack that you can't get on Spotify, or vice versa? It's virtually all the same. You have 50 million tracks. That's what you guys do. It's also why you guys charge $50 for an on-demand service per month. Talk to me a little bit about why Peloton was wrong on a basic level, and what that means. Why brands will pay, why a store will pay $50 a month to have your soundtrack.
Right. So more generally, not getting into kind of the weeds of licensing, because it's a very complicated reality, and it's taken me 10 years and I still haven't figured it out. And I honestly don't think anyone's figured it out at the end of the day. So But in order to simplify, so always when you're using music, the beautiful art of music that people, spend hours and weeks and their livelihood to produce, you need to pay for that art, like you pay for a painting, or like you pay for. So that's the general starting point where it's already gone wrong in some people's perception, because the music industry, sorry guys, but we've been terrible in charging for the art that we produce. Look at Hollywood and look at all of, every time anything is, sent or produced or showed in any type of, they're getting paid, right? And sports, they're getting paid. But in music, the trend is, let's give it away for free, or let's give it away for $2 or 50 cents, or let's bundle it with something else. And that kind of has created this completely incorrect perception or expectation that you can get away with, using music. And you need to stop right there and say, like, look, we need to protect that border, like an industry, and we need to extract value. And that means if you don't want our music, or if you want our music, pay for it. If you can live without it, that's fine, but don't play it if you don't pay it. So back to your kind of question, how could that go wrong with an innovative company like Peloton and many others? It's just the expectation that you can throw in music and, that's just a commodity that helps augment, but it augments. It makes it a much better experience. And in that case, it actually doesn't work without music either, because who wants to sit on a Peloton bike without music? So back to the fact that they were just simply going at it in the complete wrong way. They were just underestimating and disrespecting, in my opinion, the art of music. And that goes, back to our own responsibility of reminding the world, not just suing people and, legally going after them, but always protecting the value of music. So in that specific case, it's a very complex licensing structure that they needed to kind of conduct and solve, which they didn't have time or competence to solve for they were a startup running too fast, and they paid a high price for that. But they're not alone. So kind of segueing that, like, how can that happen? It happens all the time, and probably we're not coming after them as much as we should. This example was actually quite good because it told the world that you can't just take our stuff and play it because you want to sell something else. And I think what I'm trying to do, I'm coming with a small contribution to a bigger solution, right? Is increasing perception of value in music. Like, if you don't, if you want your cafe and you want to play great music, you got to pay for it. Otherwise, don't play music. It's that simple. And I usually use the example of sports, the sports industry. In Europe, as you know, in the world, there's soccer is huge, and Premier League is this massive brand, the UK league. And in the UK, a bar owner pays, like, they're doing $20,000, $30,000 to show the Premier League in their bar, and they're doing obviously a net plus on that because they're paying it. So, and in the US, it's probably the same thing with Fox or whoever it is distributing NBA, NFL, and so forth. So just take that example. They're extracting extreme value from this really good product, right? Football or baseball or whatever it is, basketball. So we have just as an important product. I mean, walk into a bar without great music, see how fun that is. So back to kind of that battle, which I think is important. And I'll be, I'm happy to be, verbal about it. And because we have nothing to be ashamed of, getting paid for our art. And a little bit, I mean, I went off your question a little bit, but I think I got to where I wanted to get to. In fact, what am I doing? Why the hell am I going into background music? That doesn't sound very fun or sexy, or elevator music, as my mom put it. And it's not. It's great music and great public context, and it's worth a lot for the business owner. And there's a great synergy between the artist and the creative industries in that specific space. So why shouldn't we be extracting value and paying the artist when their art is used to sell coffee?
Right. As someone who lived in New York for 13 years, I can tell you, on a Sunday, if you're with your friends and you're walking to a bar, the bar that you're going to choose at 1 o'clock on a Sunday is the one that's playing the NFL, and they potentially paid $10,000 to have the rights to play the NFL in that bar versus the one across the street that didn't. In the same way, I've also heard you say it's like opening up a movie theater with your Netflix account and charging people $20 to go see a movie, and you're just streaming a Netflix movie. It's not legal.
It doesn't happen. And why is that not happening? It might, maybe once, but it's not happening. And why is that? And why is it in our world, in our industry that we're in right now? I have Nielsen data from last year. We have 20 million accounts playing music from their consumer accounts. And that is exactly, from a legal standpoint, the same application as opening a cinema with your Netflix account. It is exactly the same violation. And I'm not to be the police in this drama. I'm trying to be the carrot and the product and give brands the empowerment of music streaming and, telling them about all the benefits of getting the right music in the right place at the right time so they can, augment and sell more, which I'm not afraid of saying either, because that unlocks the value. But like,
speaking of police,
as an industry, we also need to think about the stick here, because honestly, somebody's not doing their job.
Well, so speaking about, you don't want to be the police, and that's a really good point. It's not your job. Martin Gutierrez has asked, with the main problem behind the background music market being the lack of awareness of the legality between streaming music and commercial establishment, and with someone like Spotify, what's preventing someone from playing their Spotify account? And how do you plan on working around new markets in places like South America or South Asia, where maybe the awareness for what's right and what's wrong isn't as high?
It's funny because we were actually looking at some numbers today. We track everything in our little technology company. So preferences, why people are buying, why they're coming to our storefront and so forth. And I'll give you some fresh data from that, and being totally transparent. If you look at the thousands of people coming to our website every month, around 40% of those have legal and compliance at the top of their head, actually. So they have somewhere, maybe on the Spotify help page, understood that they can't use Spotify, because it's very clear in the terms and conditions that Spotify, Apple Music, and so forth, this is not for public use. Or they've been informed by some society somewhere, or they're just smart enough to understand, okay, there must be a music subscription somewhere that's for business. So it's there in the consideration process of just, around 40% of the buyers. And that's good news, but there's still 60% who came there for some other reason. And then imagine all the users who are not there. And as I said previously, we did with Nielsen, the music team over there, which are great. Last year, we quantified the number of users of consumer accounts in business premises, and it was 20 million businesses in the US and Europe. And that's just businesses. And in between those 20 million, there's probably, 60 million actual locations, because every business has, 1 or 2, 3 shops. And all of that quantified is $2.65 billion on an annual basis in royalty delta, meaning royalties that we should be flowing through to songwriters and to artists that are not flowing through correctly. And that's a lot of money, in my opinion, in an industry that's on, charging towards 70 billion or 65 billion.
It's a really good point. All right, well, staying on the topic of 2020, everyone's favorite topic, COVID. Back in March, the world began to shut down, and that meant retail, restaurants, hotels, stores, coffee shops went dark. You guys, obviously providing the music, how did that affect your business? What'd you do, and how did you deal with it? And then what's the thought process moving forward? As companies and stores opened up again, now they're starting to close again. How are you dealing with all of that?
Well, it was a major, it was nothing less than a major catastrophe. So for everyone, and it is by far, the pandemic is such a big, sad story. So who am I to sit here and complain about background music and the effects on my business? But if you ask me specifically, how did it affect what I was doing? It was a torpedo right in the side of our business, for sure. And I just looked up from my desk and realized, holy cow, this is going to be bad, really bad. And and I had just gone through a couple of really challenging years back and forth with the big fight on, governance level in my company. And it's not easy to build a music startup for sure. And then looking up, being in a better place, and then all of a sudden realizing, okay, how do we deal with this? And fast forward, we've been working night and day. We're a small team. We're 72 people out of Stockholm, and we've been working night and day with all our current customers to try to save them and keep them, alive on our platform. And we lost, 30% of our business in like 3 weeks. I mean, the engines just shut off and everyone started. But the beauty was, we were a software company. We quickly built a solution for them to pause their accounts rather than cancel. And they were able to do a COVID pause, which we were promoting 1, 2, 3 months, or a COVID discount if you were partially open. We just tried to work with them and talk with them. And wow, I mean, we were in big trouble. But then in May, it started turning around again. And then, believe it or not, we're back. They've stayed with us, and we worked together with them. And here we are back on the same level, which we were when. But by no means are we through it, as we all know. I mean, market by market is different, but it's, we are far away from through this storm. But we'll come out of this year in a very nice way relative where we thought we would be.
Right. I mean, that's, so when the stores open, you've also now got to, besides just dealing with the fact to tackle COVID, you've got to win back the people who've spent the last 8 months shopping online, ordering food. Why is someone going to go out to a store? Why is someone going to go to the restaurant? It's because of the experience, and no different than the lighting. That the lights are turned on in the store.
Like if I'm being verbal and a little bit of annoying when I tell people, like, if you don't want music, don't play it. But so that's kind of my rhetoric. But I can connect this to Doug's question here. He's asking PRS and PPL UK say they can sell licenses to use Spotify in the UK. That just says it all. That's an industry organization in the UK, set up to protect the rights of artists and songwriters. And they're telling people that they can use Netflix to open a cinema, basically. Anyone who has any understanding of music licensing knows that there's a publishing side that you need to clear when you're providing music, and there's a master side that you need to clear. It's very complex. And then in each of those instances, there's 3 dimensions of licensing that you need to clear as a source, as a music source, in order to have a fully licensed, compliant B2B offering. It's very complex. And by no means does Spotify have any of those licensing deals. Neither does Apple, neither does Amazon or anyone. So you cannot use consumer service as a source. And hearing from the industry organization that you can, it just tells us the whole story, how dysfunctional this is and how fast we got to fix it.
Glenn Booth is asking, when a song on Spotify isn't on Soundtrack Your Brand, is that because the artist has chosen to prevent Soundtrack from accessing the song, or the rights to the song were too expensive, Soundtrack has chosen not to include it?
Great question. Mostly, I mean, we've just launched our kind of on-demand product. So Soundtrack is a pretty new company. I've spent 3 years architecting what the business model for B2B streaming looks like, just like the guys on the consumer side did. What should it cost? How much should we give to labels? How much should we give to publishers? What's the minimum? What's the rev share? And all of that stuff. And we actually have around 10,000 direct deals with labels and publishers worldwide, providing a catalog of 51 million tracks in 74 markets. But still, Spotify has 10 years in the game. We do not have every track that Spotify has been able to license. Our ambition is to be there, but I would say we would cover 19 out of 20, almost, And there are certain publishers that we, for example, haven't had time to get to yet to set a license, or some label, or in some instances, actually, people don't want to be licensed as well. There are certain publishers that actually proactively seek not to be licensed.
The big ones too. You've got Universal, Warner, Sony. I mean, how many labels do you have contracts with?
On the label side, we have around 300 to 400 direct deals. And then on the publisher side, we have around 9,500. I mean, the publisher as well are direct licensed with us. So we are reporting to every publisher the playback every month every day, every minute, and the correct flow through of remuneration to that publisher for the royalties. It's a super complex machine where we're distributing all of kind of the collection that we do in terms of we have two products. We have Soundtrack Essential, which is a $35 a month product, which is a semi-interactive product. And we have Soundtrack Unlimited, which is, the fully interactive product, and that's $50. And that product is basically paying back 12 times more royalties to a label than a Spotify account or Apple account. There's all the incentive of the world for the industry to seek to actually find compliance in this market, because they're happy to pay $50. I mean, no one's complaining of our customers, more or less. They're happy to play it, just as long as you take the time to explain to them why. And it's important that also artists can make a living. All right, I'll pay $50. That's fine.
You said if you don't want to hear music, don't play it. Restaurants and store, everyone, they are playing music. They do want to hear it. They know the value that it brings. Can you tell everyone a little bit about the study that you guys did? Because we sort of know that people might buy some more stuff if they hear the right music, right? I mean, that's ultimately what. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, it's sort of a private industry study, but it's open for everyone to know. Right.
I mean, in order for me to try to contribute, or for B2B to contribute, I just convinced myself I shouldn't be afraid of becoming more commercial, right? Because I come from the tech music side and kind of a little bit scared of, talking about telling people to pay or stuff like that. But then successively, I've evolved that rhetoric and kind of self-confidence to represent the music industry. And I think, so what was your question again? I was going to, sorry,
I was on mute. My question was basically, tell us a little bit about what a business gets when they play good music.
Right.
That fits to their brand.
So in order to have that rhetoric around value and telling them, pay $35, it's not, that's what it costs me to buy a coffee, in the morning. I also had to come with what's the real value then for a cafe owner, because they're struggling entrepreneurs as well. You need to respect them from their perspective. And that solution is in the interchange of value, meaning I will help them run their business and evolve their business, and they are happy to pay us as creators when we help them do that. And what is that? Well, that's selling more coffee, or selling more burgers, or selling more wine and dinners, or shirts, or whatever. So a lot of the kind of deep research that we're doing is around the music's effect on consumer behavior and how it affects consumers' preferences, buying behaviors, actual perception of time. It's super cool when you start looking at the psychological research angle of music's effect on the human brain. There's bunches of research and neuroscientific angles to how music affects our brain in terms of psychology. Ahead of a dentist visit, for example, you can use music to calm people down. That's proven neuroscientifically if you use the right angle. So we did a lot of field studies and data research on kind of how it drives sales. And in one instance, we spent a lot of time with an independent research team, and we proved with the world's biggest hamburger chain that we could increase sales by 9%. 9% improved sales, statistically proven. I'm in Chicago telling the management team about this. Tell me one initiative in your book of initiatives right now that actually affects revenue like that. I mean, that's just unlocking. Then they'll never talk about $50 or not. If I'm able to unlock that, then we can charge them $100 and they'll happily pay for it. And I can happily pay the artists, 10 times more. So that's obviously the kind of what I need to do. I need to speak their language and kind of be the bridge between what's important for them and music.
Taylor Swift is going to help you sell more hamburgers. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it wasn't her. It was some other artist that when we published that research, I'm not going to mention his name, but a very big artist on Warner ended up in all the UK, dailies and stuff, like helps sell more hamburgers. Not very happy about that position, but like, look, we're all trying to grow the market, and we gotta chip in.
Question from Jeff Kaplan. How does Soundtrack Your Brain differentiate itself from something like Mood Media that sells inexpensive, customized streaming subscriptions to retailers?
Well, we're 100% different than them, and I don't want to sit here and sandbag any kind of competitors or anything. That's not my style, but I'll just respond to it that those companies have been around for a long while, and they come from a legacy of providing CDs and satellite-based solutions, and they don't come from the streaming industry and the streaming model, which is a model that's called pro rata, where you actually you extract royalties from your customers, being consumers or businesses in my case, and then you kind of share that money. You keep X%, and then the rest of it you share based on what's being played. And that's a very complex equation, and it's a new model, and it requires you to have a direct deal with the label or the publisher. And it requires you to have the equivalent streaming technology as Spotify or Apple Music. They have not adopted that model yet. They are working on a more old school model through indirect licensing with societies, where they're actually not even reporting on or remunerating correctly based on playback and not adopting the streaming model. So it's a completely different approach to it. And hence their music offering will be according to that. They need to download stuff, upload it, and they don't have the data pipelines or the content pipelines with labels and publishers and all the metadata updates. We're doing like 20 million metadata updates every week because songs change licensing structures. I mean, publishing moves overnight for one track and so forth. So it's just, the answer is we are the technology streaming company, and they come from a kind of different angle where they're also selling everything from cables to TVs on the wall to speakers, and music for them is probably important, but it's very secondary, and they're not looking to extract value from music. They're looking to sell it in order to sell other things too. And I don't think that's a fair trade.
Michelle is asking if there's a PDF of that study about how music affects these restaurants. There is. It's on your website, right?
Let me put the link up here on the chat in a second, Michelle. There's a lot. We put together. We have a research page, and I'll put that up there. You're free to download anything you like, anyone there.
And then here's a good question from Mike Casey. I think I know your answer, but do you think brands will, in time, pay more than $50 a month? For a big chain like, let's say, McDonald's, that's small money, though of course it's a big step up for in-store music in general. Will brands pay more?
I mean, I'm going to be the one pushing that price point for sure. While the consumer services are expected to go from the $6 ARPU that we have today, average revenue per user, they're looking to go to $5-4 in the upcoming 10 years. The wrong way, guys. It's going the wrong way. We should be charging more. And because everyone wants beautiful music in their cell phone, right? And it's $10 is not too much. 12 is not plenty, So I will keep pushing that price point for sure. But right now it's a pretty big move to put a music subscription out there for $50 already. So people are kind of asking if I'm crazy.
Here's a cool question from Doug Marshall. What's the future of curation with your platform? How accurate is artificial intelligence at curation, and what does the future look like?
That's a fun question. So I'll try to keep it short because you're kind of pushing my buttons on that one. So the fun thing about my history with Tonium and everything, still doing the same thing that I did 10 years ago, trying to figure out scaling curation, right? Providing every brand with a personal DJ is kind of what we're looking to do. And every brand can't afford a personal DJ, of course, because those guys charge thousands of bucks, right? So our AI or ML or music intelligence task has always been, how can we build a music intelligence platform or an AI platform for brands rather than for consumers? We have all experienced Spotify or Apple Music and kind of the intelligence features of that. And you might think it's good or bad. I actually think it's becoming quite good through the years. I'm consuming it a lot right now. in different aspects. But for brands, it's completely different. You're actually broadcasting music in a public domain. You are wanting to create a certain type of behavior during lunch or, during after dinner drinks. Monday sounds different than Thursday. Stockholm sounds different than Chicago. So there's this very complex distribution challenge that brands serve up. That's really interesting. That gets me, that was what got me going. And if I can get that right and unlock sales, then this is a diamond for the music industry. But answering the question, so we've actually created our own theory and research around this, how you translate a brand strategy or brand positioning statement into a music platform. So for example, I'll try to simplify. We've added another 24 layers of metadata on top of all the music of the world based on brand preference parameters. So for example, in our case, you can go in and say, I want rock music, pop music, and jazz that is from the 60s, 70s, and 80s without explicit lyrics. So I'm just building up now a use case for you. And I want it to be elegant, but also progressive. And those words you never heard in the context of filtering music before, right? So we have trained machines for 3 years through our music. We have like 4 music scientists and musicologists that just have been providing training data according to this model for 2.5 years. And right now, our machines are kind of identifying music based on that training data on these 24 parameters for all the music in the world. So we're now filtering music in real time based on how brands kind of think about it. So you can test it on our platform, like a simple version. But it's super cool because that's what a brand wants. They want to create the soundtrack quickly, and then they want to go sell coffee, and they don't want to worry about explicit lyrics or the music being off at a certain time or so forth. So that's very cool. Advanced kind of new angle to kind of music AI, if you like.
I think we're gonna wrap it up in a second, right, Tom? But I want to ask you a lightning round question. As a CEO, as a founder, you've had startups before. What would you say your strengths are? What's your strong point? And then also a humbling question: what's your weakness?
I think I thought about it. I mean, I think one thing that you need to have in this industry or in anything is perseverance is the word, right? Or, just never giving up. And I think that's probably my biggest strength, because there's 9 failures for every successful thing, for everyone's successful kind of progress. You're constantly being hammered with challenges, failures, people who think you're doing the wrong thing, constantly, people who don't want to understand what you're doing, people, but if you believe in what you're doing and you kind of can stand up straight and intellectually and emotionally get behind your idea, then you have the prerequisites of perseverance. And then if you have a personality that I've built through the years, then I just don't give up. I never give up. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I think that's my strength. And then there's like 9 weaknesses to that strength probably as well. I think, I'm a little bit too, in general, like not that commercial. I'm working on it, as you hear, trying to be here, talk about my business. But in general, I'm a bit more shy. I don't really like to kind of promote and tell people how great things are or how good it is what we're doing. And I think that's been something that I've been really struggling with through the years. And you need to, and I've learned from some great people that, you shouldn't be shy about what you do. You should be proud of what you do. But I really have not been good at that, and I'm still struggling with it. It's not in my nature to kind of go out there and talk about everything, which you have to do, because I have to get up and kind of, sing the gospel every morning about what I'm doing, because it's not going to change by itself. So I'm pretty, that whole thing of being kind of a person out there, someone in the media and stuff like that is nothing that comes natural to me. It's like I'm not good at it, and I needed to improve those things. And you've obviously been helping a little bit on it, but so those kind of commercial aspects of being kind of charismatic CEO and kind of that person, that's something that I'm not great at and that I'm working on. But at the end of the day, we're all people, right? And if you run a small team, good people, get to know people for real, and then you're just yourself, and that's all you can come with to the table. And usually that works out if you're in a good spot. So these are all kind of just add-ons, and there's a lot of things like that probably I could kind of talk about my weaknesses, but like it's always like if you believe in what you're doing and you know that you do have weaknesses, then you're fine, because you don't need to hide them. So you just roll with it.
Great.
But the music industry is an interesting one, right? It's a very challenging place to be active in.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Tom. I'll hand over to you.
Guys, that was amazing, as I expected it to be. But honestly, it's my favorite episode yet. Today is number 35. I always cut it off before the hour, but I could have sat here and let this one go for at least another 45 minutes. And that's a tribute to you two. We appreciate your honesty, your candor. Ola, you've got a huge heart and a huge brain, and we in the music industry really appreciate what you are trying to do to make it better for all of us. So thank you. Keep that perseverance going.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. I'm honored to be on this amazing show, and kind of the concept is such a great. This is something great that came out of this weird situation we're in, right?
No kidding. Well, folks, we are taking next week off, and the reason we're doing that, we want you to focus on voting. I also anticipate, unfortunately, we'll probably be at Civil War next week, so we're not going to have a program next week, but we will be back in 2 weeks, and we invite you to come back and enjoy more of these, and keep the recommendations of future speakers coming. Honestly, that's how this thing has continued to grow, as I get so many inbound referrals of terrific speakers like Ola. So thank you both to you gentlemen. It's been awesome. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear a mask, and vote. Thanks. Signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.